個佢 Dante 佢出產。
Good. I'm getting a little heady for you, but this is like Britton at 3 o'clock in the morning stuff, all right? There's no comparative. It's just good. But there's only light. But like, he's not saying like it's good compared to this other thing, because there's just the one thing. But because he gets to define what good is. He is the definer of good. Can he observe what he created, and he knows that it is good. Not in comparison. God himself is the creator of good, and he is the determiner of goodness. It's the same as everything he does. It's the same thing. Like when you have a sense of what right and wrong is, that's his fingerprint. When you, as image bearers of God, which we're going to cover in just a second, like when you like, that's not right. He's the one who determines what that is. He's the determiner of goodness. And so when something doesn't set right with you, that's echoing something of him and his nature that he's placed in you. When something stirs in you, when you see orange skies like 6 o'clock in the afternoon at Target, you know, you're leaving the Target parking lot about 6:30 in the evening. The sky's the most brilliant, gorgeous thing you've ever seen in your life. And something shakes in you in Target's parking lot. You know what I'm saying? That's his fingerprint. Who made that qualitatively good? And who told you it was good? It's him. When something in you longs for a world that is right, when something in you longs for a world that is good, and it just intrinsically, you know, like this isn't the way it's supposed to be. That's him. That's his echo. That's his fingerprint. He is the creator of good. He is the determiner of good. He is himself good, not in comparing it to other things, just objectively on his own. He creates good things. He's placed goodness in our hearts. We long to be a part of his goodness. It's written on all of our souls. We only made it through day one of creation so far, by the way. Day one of creation has concluded. It was a night followed by a day. God wasn't quite done yet. And verse 6 says, God said, all right, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters. Let's separate the waters from the waters. God made the expanse, separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were over the expanse. Super fun. Got to discuss that another time. And it was so. God called the expanse heaven. And it was evening, and it was morning, the second day. I want you to draw your eyes to that line where it says that it was so. Into verse 7, right there, you see it? It was so. He said, he spoke this, did this, and it was so. See that what God intends to do, he can bring about. He's doing things that are incomprehensible to me, that are like hilariously beyond my power. Like my kids think I'm awesome and I can do all things. Nope. Like there's a separation between us and him. He's speaking and like heavens are existing. All right. Like it is so. He's the God who can make all things so. That tells us a fifth thing about him. One, that he's all powerful. This God is not just the creator of good. He's not just there's an all-powerfulness to him, which, by the way, has huge ramifications for the world. It has huge ramifications for our church. It has huge ramifications for you. As you look at the things that you face and the things that are too big for you to carry, the things that stress you out, the things that are overwhelming to you, the things that seem insurmountable to you and I are not heavy for him. There's a peace that comes from getting to rest under the hand of the one who is all powerful. It's a peace that comes from recognizing that the one who spoke the universe into existence is on our side. Here's what I want to do. As we go through the next big chunk of this passage, we're going to read a lot of it straight through. But we've talked about two key phrases, all right? We've talked about one, that where he says that it was good, and another phrase where he says that something was so. It was good and it was so. And just to help us feel the weight of that, I want to read through verses 9 until I stop, all right? And every time it says it was so or it was good, I want us to say that together. Like we do when Austin leads us through the passages. You with me? See what I'm saying? So I'm going to pause. We're going to say it was so. We're going to say it was good together. Just feel the weight of this. All right, verse 9. It says this. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place, and let dry land appear. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called the seas, and God saw that. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation and plants yielding seed and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds. Trees were bearing fruit, in which was their seed, each according to their own kind. And God saw that. And it was evening, and it was morning. It was the third day. Then God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be signs for our seasons, for days and years. Let them be lights in the expanse of heaven to give light upon the earth. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God sent them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth and to rule over the day and over the night, to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that. Yeah. That was evening, that was morning, it was the fourth day. God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures. Let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kind, every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that. God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the seas, let birds multiply in the earth. And it was evening, it was morning, it was the fifth day. And God said, all right, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts on the earth according to their kind. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that. God brings about land and sea and plants and animals and sun and moon and stars. Spoke it. And it was so. But he wasn't done. Like there's still this key piece left. Like he's creating it. I feel like there's this building of excitement. Like the music, like the soundtrack is like coming, it's about to hit, right? Humanity finally enters the story with this really unique distinctive. Verse 26 says this, then God said, let us, see that us? That's interesting. We already covered that. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. 6th point is this, there's a God who created us in his image. There's a God who created us in his image. Like humanity is created with the distinction of being the only thing in creation specifically made in God's image. There's a uniqueness to that. We could do a whole series just on what it means to be created in the image of God. It actually sounds fun. Maybe we'll do that next. I don't know. But while all of creation reflects his glory, like everything he'd made at this point, it all reflects his glory, it all reflects his power, it all reflects his nature, but only in part. And then this new thing comes, like this man, this woman, is created in a way that reflects his nature and his heart, his character, as image bearers. Not just as created things, but image bearers. Now, we don't carry his full nature or his full capacity or anything, but we reflect an image of God in a way that is completely unique among everything else in creation. There's something about you as you're sitting there, like you reflect the image of God in some very specific and beautiful, powerful ways that you may not be aware of. Maybe some stuff to unpack with your tribe. But listen, just as a child of God, you reflect his nature. When you think about people's natural capacity for goodness and justice and love and mercy, that we all collectively understand those are good and valuable things. There's something in us that strives towards that, wants to reflect those things. It's a reflection of the image of God as an image bearer. That desire in all of us to create or care for creation, to seek the good of the world, to develop, that's reflecting the image of God. That stuff in us that where there's a desire for us to have relationships, for us to be in community, for togetherness, like deep, intimate connection with another. That reflects the image of God. It also reflects the reason why he created us in the first place. You reflect the image of God also, like as a male or a female. He's got it listed right there, like male and female, he created them. Each of those two distinctives, like reflecting the character and nature of God in unique and beautiful ways. Each created intentionally, each created specifically. You as a man or a woman, a child of God, like as a man or a woman, you are reflecting something about God that is distinct, beautiful. God was intentional and purposeful in the way that he created you. So God creates people in his image. And now look at God's intention for those people. This is huge for us. His intention for those people. Verse 28 says about those people he created, said God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish, the sea, the birds of the heaven, every living thing that moves on the earth. And then God said this, he said, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that's on the face of the earth, every tree with seed in its fruit. Like you shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth and every bird of the heavens, to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I've given every green plant for food. And it was so. God's intention for people was to create them, to bless them, to provide for them, and then as we'll see next week, to have a relationship with them, to be known, to enjoy him. They were created to be blessed by him. Point 7, that there's a God who cares for his people. There's a God who cares for his people. That's a foundational thought that a lot of us struggle with before we come to Christ. Some of us will get the idea, okay, I'm all right with a God that exists. I'm okay, fine with that. But something in us like has this doubt of his goodness. That comes from next week. What we see in creation, what we see in chapter 1 as the beginning of the story in his nature is that there is a God who cares for his people, that his heart is to bless, his heart is to provide for. That is his intention for every one of us. He sought their fruitfulness, sought their flourishing. It seems that God ushered humanity in with at least a point, like a reason was to enjoy what he had created. To give that, and his generosity and his kindness, to give to them something beautiful, something complete, something perfect. That was God's heart for them, to give them his best. The Westminster Catechism says man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. But a lot of us, we like to rephrase that where we say man's chief end is to glorify God by enjoying him forever. That's what you see in Genesis 1, that God's intent was to create people who he could care for perfectly. That was his intent. Now, next week, we'll talk about how that gets shattered. And the rest of the story is how God's working to bring it back. But his intent is to bring about these people who he could care for. He brings all this about, creates this beautiful, perfect universe to place these people in, to bless them and provide for them in every way. That's the heart of God. That's his intent for you. That's his care for you. That's his concern for you. This is what he says about that. Verse 31, God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. It was evening, it was morning, it was the sixth day. This originator, this creator of everything that is, looks at what he's done and says it is very good. Communicates his holiness, his power, his might, his intentionality, his care, his love, his concern. All of that is visible in the way that he created, in the way it was meant to be. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 says this, thus the heavens and earth were finished, all the host of them. Then it says this, but on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it, God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. The eighth thing I want us to see in this passage is that God is a God who intends for us to rest in him. And he's not this, like we can say all those other things about God, like we can say all the other stuff about his nature, and he could be this distant, like watchmaker kind of God. But this gives a hint. Because like there's something significant going on here. Like, it's way bigger than God needing a rest day. You really think God needed a rest day? Like, I mean, oh, it's been a tough week, I'm going to take a nap. No, like that's not what's going on here. He's setting a pattern for his people. It could be this like distant watchmaker God, but something about Sabbath and him setting a pattern for his people to come and rest, to stop, to move away from the toil and just come and be with him. Says something about his intent. It wasn't just something he was going to place these people in there and leave them alone, to let them work the land and do the thing. No, it was to stop, to rest, to draw near. He created them for relationship. He created us, you and I, to rest in him. By creating rest and also resting, God declared something really profound, that our value isn't found in our production. He's declaring that like there's something more to be done than this endlessly toil. That there's something more significant than producing a little bit more. It's interesting, like the Sabbath shows up in the very beginning, but strangely, we rarely show up for the Sabbath. We'll toil and strive and scrape for a little bit more, and there's something about this right there in the beginning that God's saying, hey, there's something bigger and better than that. It's him. Drawing near to the one who loves you, the one who provides for you, the one who wants to bless you, the one who is all powerful, who can supersede everything you're working at anyway, and just says, just come and be. Just come and be with me. Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor, do all your work. 7th day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. You, your son, your daughter, your male servant, female servant, livestock, the sojourner who's with you in your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that's in them. And he rested on the seventh. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. The Sabbath is a day to rest in his blessing. All right? So I don't know what Sabbath looks like for you. For some of you, this may be your action step. If you're a believer in the room, like you don't have any kind of intentionality behind Sabbath, there's something to that. I want you to examine why that is, why you can't set the work down. Why can't you set the work down? Why can't you have a day to draw near to him, enjoy him at the exclusion of other things? Like what is it about life that's not letting you do that? Maybe some action steps for us in that. There is value to our work, of course, right? Like that, like he's called us to it, gave it to us. But there's also a lot of value in stopping. I think one of the big takeaways from the beginning of the story, it's our last one, all right, last point. I think one of the big takeaways from the beginning of the story is like we find humanity created by the main character, not functioning as the main character, right? That there is a main character. He is his story. He's the one who is all powerful. Like he is the one who spoke and the universe has existed, right? He's the hero of the story. I'm not the hero of the story. And a lot of times we get that backwards. Sometimes like we walk into places like this, we just go through our day, like we get that flipped where it seems like everything else is orbiting us, that we are the hero of the story, we are the main character, and God is one piece of this tornado that surrounds you. I just want you to see in this story, like it's not about you. I think one of the creation account, it's intended to orient us rightly to the God who made us, the God who loves us, the God who sent his son for us. The creation account orients us correctly. When I come back to the creation account, I always think about Psalm 8. I always think about Psalm 8 when I come back to the creation account. I read the creation account, and immediately I'm at Psalm 8 in verse 3. When David writes this, he says, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you've set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? In light of who you are, in light of what you've done, why do you care about something so insignificant, so sinful, so distant, so like obstinate as me? That's the response that Genesis 1 elicits out of us. In light of what he's done, in light of what he's capable of, in light of who he is, the majesty, the glory, the grandeur of this God, what are we that he's even mindful of us? And how good it is that he's not just mindful, he sacrificially loves us through the person of Jesus Christ. Counted us valuable enough for the Son to leave heaven, come to earth, to die at the hands of men, to be beaten and mocked and tortured and murdered on a cross. Like, in light of who he is, what is he that he's mindful of? Let alone what are we that he would come and do that? The creation account orients us correctly. The ninth thing is there's a God, and you are not him. There is a God, but you ain't him. That's a huge thing for us to swallow, because in our own eyesight, looking out from our own head, we are. We are the ones who are in charge. We are the ones who are orchestrating. We're the ones who are like bringing things about. We're the ones who have plans and a future. Like looking out through our eyes, we are God. And this causes us to reorient and say, it's not. There is a God. I'm not him. Daniel 2:28 was a passage we talked about in men's Bible study this summer, where it's simply like the king of Babylon is demanding all the wise men tell him his dream and then interpret it, which is nuts and impossible, right? And so he hears Daniel can interpret dreams, calls Daniel, and then Daniel says, listen, nobody can do this. Nobody can tell you what the dream is that you had and then interpret it for you. Like, nobody can do this. But, verse 28 says, but there is a God in heaven who can. We talked about like the peace of that statement, just like stopping and like, okay, just think on that, like reflect on that, just orient yourself around those few words. There is a God in heaven. There is a peace that verse yields, that there's a power to that verse. There is just a refreshing that comes from just those few words, reminding you that you don't have to be God. That those things that feel too big for you, they actually are too big for you. They should stress you out. That future that you can't see, that you're working so hard to secure, you can't. It is too big for you. Those desires, those things you have in your life that you long for, that you just not figure out how to get any traction on, yeah, those are too much too. But there's a God in heaven who is all-powerful, who is perfectly good, who is entirely holy. And because his nature is to love, he also loves you perfectly. There's a peace in that. Most importantly, it's not just about handling all your stuff in your life and your struggles and your future. Most importantly, he's big enough to handle your sin. It's the biggest thing that you are not capable of handling. I am not capable of handling. He's big enough to not just brush you off when you fall short and give you a little bit of encouragement for the day. He's big enough to give you a new life for this life and eternity. You can't touch that. You have no power to do this. You can't overcome the sin in the first place. He's big enough to overcome the sin to secure a new life here and a new life in eternity. He's the only one's capable of that. This God that spoke the universe into creation, he is wise enough, he is powerful enough to create a world, to see it twisted by sin, and then create a way to save it, all in his own power. He's enough for you. He's enough for me. Genesis 1, all right? This is what we've been introduced to. We got the main character set up, all right? Got the beginning of the setting, but we'll get that next time, all right? Got the main character set up. Seeing he's a God who creates all things. He's 3 in 1. He brings about good. Talked about how he's all powerful. He created us in his image. Talked about how he cares for his people. How he intends for us to rest in him, not just endlessly toil. We're not that kind of God. We're finite, temporary people whom he's come for, to have a relationship with, to redeem, to restore, to draw him back to him. Christians, that should drive us to worship. That should drive us to praise. Like when we sing these songs, we come into this place like just reorienting ourselves around the one who loves us. That should change us at a deep level. And if you've come in here dragging a little bit, and you've kind of lost sight of his glory and his holiness and majesty, I'm telling you, you don't need to get a few more things done this afternoon. You need to go rest in him. Remind yourself of who he is. Remind yourself of what he's capable of. You don't need more productivity. You need more him. All right? Some of you, like Christians in the room, your takeaway is going to be centered around Sabbath, what that looks like and what that's for. But if you're not a Christian yet, like I just need you to hear like that the God that is capable of all of that. And I know you probably have questions about that. We still have some too, all right? Like the God who is able to do all of that loved you enough to come for you. That the sin in your life, the sin in your heart, the time that you've walked away from him, like there's a distance that you've created between yourself and the one who loves you perfectly. And he loves you so much that he wasn't willing to abandon you in that and say, all right, that's the way you want to go, fine. He loved you so much that he came for you anyway. Like the Son left heaven, came to earth to get between you and the wrath that you deserved. That was your death on that cross that should have happened. He got on that cross in your place, in my place, took our punishment on himself, defeated death for us by beating the grave, rose from the grave, lives on high, like interceding for us now, praying for us before the Father now. He's done everything that needed to be done, all of which you couldn't do. Offered all of that just as a gift. Saying to his children, his image bearers, if you want to have a relationship with me, I've done everything that needs to be done for you to come home. Listen, if you'll trust in that gospel, in the person and the finished work of Jesus Christ, if you'll trust in him by faith, turn from your sin and commit to follow him instead, you will be saved. Saved from yourself, saved from your sin, and restored back to the God who loves you like this. This morning, will you say yes? Our next step team is going to be back there in the back, and some of our folks who are believers who've trusted in Christ, and they are ready to talk with you about what that looks like, with how that would happen, how that would proceed. They won't have an answer to every question, but they've worked through some of the same questions you have. In just a minute, our band's going to lead us in a time of response. And if you're not a believer, that next step team is there for you. And say, hey, listen, I've got some questions about this. Could we sit down and talk? Could we talk later? Could we get coffee later this week? Would you just pray for me? Absolutely. That's why that next step team's there. They're also there for those of you in the room who are believers who just need somebody to pray with you. Even it has nothing to do with the sermon at all right? Sometimes I forget to say that. Like, we just want to be a church that prays for each other, and so you've got some members of your church who would love to just hear what's burdening you and pray for you. They're there for you. They're also there with stuff like that Sabbath thing. If you're like, listen, I don't know what in the world to do with Sabbath. Like, can I just tell you my schedule and you just, like, tell me I'm wrong somehow that I can't? Like, how do I find the time for this? Go talk to them. They're struggling with the same thing you are. That's why they're back there. I love it in the weeks when there's so many people stacked up back there with Next Step Team that there's a line. That's the way it's supposed to be, all right? Now, me and Austin and staff, we're around throughout the week, but sometimes it's a lot easier just to go back to a person who loves you, who's standing back there against the back wall. They're easier to find than we are sometimes, okay? So what's your next step? If you're a believer, what does this elicit out of you? Having come back through the creation account, what does that bring about inside of you? What are you going to do about it? How's it change you right now where you sit? If you're not a Christian yet, and this is something you've been wrestling with and trying to figure out, what are you going to do about that? Like we want to be a church. We designed Oaks to be a church from the get-go 2.5 years ago, where we could be a church where people who didn't have it all figured out, who had questions about faith, could come and find answers. We built this place for people like you. So ask the questions. We respect the questions. What I can't respect is so much apathy to say, listen, I don't really care. I'm going to stay where I'm at. I'm not going to talk to anybody about it. I'm just going to push it out of my mind. I'm going to push him away. I'm going to push this away. I'm going to go about in business like nothing happened. I don't respect that. But I do respect you asking the questions that are on your mind. Let us help. Let's walk with you. I want to pray for you. And then our band's going to lead us in a time of response. And then it's going to be your time to choose what you need to do, okay?